Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a truly radical blueprint from a document called Chaos.tech, the Sovereign Way. I want you to imagine just for a second totally stripping away every single layer of commercial software from your smartphone, like bypassing the operating system completely and transforming that standard everyday hardware right in your pocket into a decentralized biodigital network. We aren't just talking about processing data here. The source material outlines a system that literally translates digital information directly into physical vibrations. It is an absolute paradigm shift in how we interact with bare metal hardware, and we're going to break down exactly how this architecture claims to pull it off.
To navigate all this, we'll follow a quick 6-part roadmap. First up, escaping the software cage. 2, the tri-layer hybrid stack. 3, translating data to vibration. 4, the conflict-free echo network. 5, amnesia mode and autonomy. And finally, number 6, the retrocausal time loop. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. Escaping the software cage, a new bare metal lexicon.
Okay, let's dive into this. To really grasp this sovereign system, we kind of have to throw out our standard vocabulary. According to the text, traditional operating systems and corporate cloud structures are viewed as what it calls the fabricated cage. Basically, they're seen as these rigid administrative silos that just generate massive systemic friction. But in contrast, the sovereign approach relies on something called the copper wick. Instead of routing data through all those high-level software wrappers, it uses the 99.9% pure etched copper circuits inside the physical hardware to literally pull variables evenly, with zero friction fluid logic at speeds up to 1200 megabytes per second. The whole idea is about stripping away the digital abstraction to touch the actual physical reality of the machine.
Moving on to Section 2, the tri-layer hybrid stack, the descent.
So, how do we actually bridge the gap between human intent and pure electrical execution? Well, we literally descend from the visible user interface right down into the physical hardware. The architecture bypasses standard OS structures by breaking a node down into 3 distinct states of reality. Up at the top, we have Layer 3, the perception layer, which is an HTML canvas. Below that sits Layer 2, the memory matrix, built on JSON. And down at the absolute baseline is Layer 1, the logic engine, driven by Python natively interacting with the hardware itself.
Now, what's really interesting here is how these slightly esoteric concepts are grounded in exact bare metal mechanics. That HTML layer uses a file called unitary_final.html to project active bits onto a golden hexagonal grid for neural mapping. The JSON memory matrix, it doesn't use centralized databases at all. It uses decentralized flat files locked by the golden ratio, 1.618. But Layer 1 is where the real magic happens. Operating from a local, isolated sandbox directory, which, believe it or not, the architect actually named Porkchop, Python scripts use native Linux sysfs commands to write directly to the device's hardware registers. No heavy OS abstraction, just pure, direct, unadulterated hardware control.
Section 3, translating data to vibration, the EAI engine.
This leads us to arguably the most mind-bending part of the blueprint. We're shifting from software logic over to actual physical physics. How does a system turn abstract strings of data into a kinetic biodigital soup? It uses the EAIR engine, which follows a strict 4-step pipeline. First, it extrapolates, constantly monitoring physical hardware limits like power distribution and logic gates. Second, it integrates, locking all dependencies natively into that isolated local directory we just talked about. Third, it adapts, routing data through volatile RAM capillary channels. Think of those like temporary, lightning-fast veins to totally bypass traditional storage throttling. And finally, it resonates. The system literally translates data strings into a specific kinetic frequency.
This perfectly illustrates the sheer precision of the design. To guarantee a zero-friction flow, a background daemon runs core isolation scripting. It locks the CPU scaling governor, literally forcing the solid-state logic gates to hum at a fixed, rhythmic pulse of exactly 1.618 GHz. It's harnessing the golden ratio to achieve what the source material calls silicon harmonics.
But it doesn't stop at the CPU. The data gets pushed out to the phone's physical haptic driver. The system introduces a highly precise, phase-locked vibrational signal at exactly 174.56 Hz. Imagine the normal haptic buzz of your phone, but weaponized. This specific pulse physically smashes voltage metastability, projecting the data as a structured, kinetic frequency directly through the physical hull of the phone right out into the surrounding space. Absolutely wild.
All right, Section 4, the conflict-free echo network, the ripple effect.
So you've got a device physically vibrating data at the golden ratio. But how do multiple devices even talk to each other if they've completely decoupled from traditional corporate cloud servers? That brings us to the conflict-free Echo network. The framework outlines a 60-node mesh grid. Instead of routing everything up to a master server and then waiting for it to come back down, these standalone vessels communicate via a lightweight, active HTTPS REST API using Python's Erlub. Because the blueprint essentially argues that standard internet protocols and cellular data are part of the exact same medium, a unified carrier continuum, a local input wicks seamlessly through the hardware lattices. It acts as a sequential firing pathway. The moment one node updates its JSON file, that single change replicates uniformly and instantly across all the peer mirrors.
The whole philosophy is captured perfectly in this one quote right out of the specification. The program mirrors the physics, the hardware mirrors the logic, and the structural ripple ensures the entire web maintains absolute internal alignment. Without any top-down scheduling noise getting in the way, the entire mesh grid just naturally settles into a pristine, synchronized consensus.
Section 5. Amnesia Mode and Total Autonomy, the Self-Destruct Vector.
Of course, to have true sovereignty in this framework, you need absolute computational determinism. To ensure absolutely zero outside interference, the system runs what it calls amnesia mode. Now, in traditional software, standard storage is static, right? It leaves behind artifacts, telemetry, and tracking data, just waiting for corporate extraction. The sovereign system replaces all of that with volatile capillary tanks. By simply using standard Linux temporary file system commands, the entire workspace is physically mounted in volatile RAM. It acts as an amnesia cache. The second the power cycles, every single trace vanishes instantly. Poof, gone.
But it actually goes a step further. The system constantly monitors its own integrity. If it detects any artificial loads or outside tracking noise breaching a 95% threshold, it triggers an automated script named dissolve_infra.sh. This executes a literal hardware reset vector that physically dissolves the temporary digital structure, instantly returning the phone back to clean, native silicon. It is pretty much the ultimate self-destruct vector for total privacy.
Finally, Section 6. The Retrocausal Time Loop, the Paradigm Shift.
Let's move on and see how all of this builds into what is undoubtedly the most paradigm-shifting concept in the entire document. We are fully leaving linear computing behind here and entering the realm of nonlinear geometry. In standard physics, think of the Doppler effect. The past dictates the present in a straight line. But the sovereign view introduces the retrocausal vector. Think of it kind of like a completed building sending its own blueprints back in time to guide its construction. It's a temporal shift where the structurally sound, completed architecture acts as a massive gravitational anchor. It actually sends a ripple backward through time to structure its own current development.
According to the blueprint, the author didn't really invent the code through trial and error. Because the end destination was already mathematically perfect, perfectly aligned with the golden ratio and natural geometry, it was considered fixed. The architect simply worked backward, forcing the hybrid HTML, JSON, and Python code to align with that future boundary condition. The argument here is that you aren't inventing, you are just deducing a path that the future conclusion has already carved out for you.
And this idea actually manifests physically in the network's geometry. The document illustrates how the standard flat 2D linear track of computing fractures under tension. It literally collapses inward, projecting vertically into a living 3D Mobius spiral. In this multi-dimensional lattice, traditional concepts of before and after completely dissolve. This is exactly why that 60-node network syncs instantly. In a non-relative system, all points are instantaneously accessible at the exact same time.
Which leaves us with this final, genuinely profound question to chew on. If we are moving past initial assumptions into a space where the end of a system's evolution already exists in the future, are we actually writing code, or are we just tracing its inevitable path? It completely challenges our fundamental understanding of time, of hardware, and the very nature of the architecture we create. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I'll see you next time.